Good evening, Munchkins. It's Dad here once again, and the title of tonight's rant is The Detritus of Christianity in Normal Americana. Now, there's a mouthful, but I think you're going to really enjoy this particular rant. As always, if you like what you hear, please be sure and hit the share button at the bottom of the rant. If you love what you hear, please share this, because that's the only way that we can get the message across to lots of other people, and it puts me in a position to do exactly that. Having said that, let's rock. So let's begin with a flat assertion, right? And the flat assertion, as required by Dad Rant's rules, is what we're going to say, and then we're going to provide the evidence to support that flat assertion. So my flat assertion is this: Americans live in a great country. The behavior of her citizens is what makes her great. That behavior is the detritus of her Christian founding, and this greatness is manifested in little daily things that we take for granted. This past weekend was filled with examples of this greatness in a ton of little things. Let me explain. Your mom and I were attending an 8th grade girls softball tournament in Beaverton, which is about 30 minutes west of Portland. My grandnieces had traveled from Southern Oregon to play in a tournament in the Portland area. Man, I'm old enough to have grandnieces? Say it isn't so. It was an absolutely fabulous day. It was sunny and about 75 degrees with a slight breeze. It was one of those perfect summer days that can only occur in Portland in the Pacific Northwest. Even the 35-minute commute from Vancouver cooperated, and there was like minimal traffic. We crossed the Columbia River, and that never disappoints, and the Columbia was magnificent as always. Both Mount Hood and Mount St. Helens were showing off their summer fashion. Both mountains were adorned with their primary summer browns, complemented with a little bit of that white snow that was still left over from the winter. Both mountains were flaunting their spectacular beauty against a cloudless blue sky. And then once we crossed the Columbia, we got to cross over the Willamette River as well. And Portland has 11 magnificent bridges that you can cross to get across that river. I couldn't help but notice that Portland's West Hills were absolutely beautiful as well. It was almost like they were in competition with Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood. Mount Adams is in the background. It was absolutely just a gorgeous day. The physical beauty of the Northwest already put us in a great mood for our arrival at the softball fields over in Beaverton, which is about 35 minutes west of Portland. But the softball field is where a good day became a spectacular day. The behavior of the fans, the parents, the players, and the referees at the tournament were the very exemplification of etiquette and class. They ran a veritable clinic on civil discourse and good behavior. The day was filled with good morning, how are you doing, can I help you with that? The popcorn stand is over here. The bathroom is over there. We heard parents telling their kids to say please and thank you. We heard parents telling their kids don't step in front of people without saying excuse me. We heard kids saying excuse me and can I take the trash can out? Can I take the trash out for you? I haven't heard that many yes sir and no sir since I was in the Air Force. It was really incredible. I was blown out of the water. I thought I had stepped into Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine, and it was 1965 back in Portland again. That's how cool it was. The cleanliness of the ballpark was unreal. There wasn't a piece of trash to be found anywhere on the grounds. The fields were perfectly manicured, and when the sun went down, the lights came on like clockwork. The bathrooms were immaculate. I saw a kid pick up a piece of trash that wasn't even his own piece of trash and put it in the garbage can. If I was a woman with pearls, I would have been clutching my pearls. People treated the ballpark, including the bathroom, as if it was their own, which technically, of course, is true. It is their own. The definition of a public facility is that it belongs to all of us. But in non-Christian locales, people have forgotten that fact. More on that later in the rant. Then I looked around and I saw that the games were being coached by the dads. The moms were all there managing the younger brothers and sisters. The grandparents, aunts, uncles were all at the games cheering on the kids. The referees clearly came from the neighborhoods, and from the banter that occurred between the innings and between the games, it was clear that the referees knew the parents on a first-name basis. Referee and coach disagreements were handled in a civil manner. There were no temper tantrums or cursing when calls didn't go the right way. Both players and coaches shook hands after the games. It was a veritable Norman Rockwell painting. We engaged in a steady banter with people that we didn't know and were unlikely to ever see again. We discussed the weather, the teams, the plays, the kids. We cheered for our kids' teams, but we also complimented the teams, the kids that were on other teams when they made great plays. When a player or referee got injured, the players took a knee and the fans took a moment of silence to show respect for the injured participant. When the participant was deemed fit to return, a rousing cheer rose from the fans from both teams. It was really incredible. As I left, I reflected on how fortunate I am to live in a country where days like that are not just possible, but that happen all the time in every state in the United States. And when you realize how rarely this occurs around the globe, you begin to appreciate what a great country we live in. Think of the amazing everyday things that we take for granted in the United States. We take for granted the wonderful freeway system that we drove to get to the game. We take for granted the well-maintained parking lot when we arrived at the game. We take for granted running water and the clean bathroom facilities at the game. We take for granted the snack shack staffed by volunteers at the game. We take for granted the lighting systems at the ballpark. We take for granted the perfectly manicured fields, the well-maintained dugouts, and the well-maintained infield. We expect this in America, and we get it about 90% of the time. And then I realized that there were no guards to watch the field after the games were over. Now think about this. This was clearly a multi-million-dollar facility. It had electronic scoreboards, well-maintained and manicured turf, well-maintained and manicured infields, and a spotless restroom and snack shack facility. And there were no guards, no lock gates, no police officers anywhere in sight. Then I realized that we could not have had that experience only because of Christianity. I don't know how many of the attendees at the games were Christians. I don't know how many of them ever attend church. But I do know that we experienced that day only because of Christianity. It just so happened that the United States recently hosted the World Cup. Now, I'm not a soccer fan, so I didn't go see any of the games, except for a few highlights. But I couldn't help but notice the social media commentary from visitors from other countries who were experiencing the United States for the first time. It was truly amazing to listen to people from other countries marvel at the things we Americans take for granted, the very things that I observed at my grandniece's softball tournament. They marveled at ranch dressing, gigantic pancakes, the size of Walmart and Costco, the size of our cars and trucks. They marveled at the ubiquitous availability and use of air conditioning in our massive fireworks displays. They marveled at our massive professional ballparks, pizza and beer, and our Texas barbecue. We Americans don't think twice about that stuff. We just take it for granted. Those social media posts reminded me that in the rest of the world, to include Europe, that stuff doesn't even exist. No air conditioning, no ranch dressing, no free refills on sodas, and for heaven's sake, no Texas barbecue. No wonder they're fighting all the time. If they had Texas barbecue, they'd be doing all that fighting. Now, that's just the material stuff that the visitors noticed. Even more important and amazing was their commentary about the general kindness of Americans. They couldn't believe the general friendliness of the average American citizen. They commented on how perfect strangers would compliment them on their clothing or their accent. They commented on how Americans would proactively offer directions if they looked lost. They commented on how Americans proactively offered food recommendations on the best restaurants. They couldn't believe the general courtesy. They commented on how people were always saying, "Excuse me," if they accidentally bumped into them. They commented on how at Walmart, if they were purchasing a small quantity and they were at the back of the line, the other patrons would invite them to the front of the line because, "Hey, you only have a couple of items. I got a big purchase. Why don't you go to the front of the line?" They couldn't believe that strangers that they passed on the sidewalk would look them in the eye and say, "Good morning." This is just normal American behavior, just like the behavior of my great-grandniece's softball tournament that we all take for granted. But apparently, that just doesn't happen everywhere else in the world. That stuff, kiddos, is what we take for granted is actually an essential component to the quality of life, but to the reason that America is the number one country as measured by GDP in the world and the number one destination in the world for immigration. Civility is the grease that makes the engine run smoothly. The word civility comes from the word civilization. That's the root word. And the civilization we live in flows from the principles of Judeo-Christianity. If we lose Judeo-Christianity, we lose all that normal behavior that I just described that goes along with it. I submit to you that the one measure of the quality of a nation's civilization is the caliber of its shared spaces. This same standard can be applied to the regions within a country. If people only care about the things that belong to them, it follows that they only care about themselves. And a selfish people can't produce individuals who perform selfless acts. Just as exterior appearance in an individual is a reflection of interior thought, exterior appearances in a country is a reflection of interior thought as well. Let me give you this quote from James Allen, the author of As a Man Thinketh. The outer conditions of a person's life will always be found to be harmoniously related to his inner state. Men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are. If the public spaces of a nation are a pigsty, that is a reflection of the inner thinking of the population. If the public space of a city is a pigsty, that is also a reflection of the inner thinking of the population. One must change the inner thinking to change the outward appearances. To be blunt, the vast majority of the United States is reflective of what we observed at the softball tournament in Beaverton. The parts of the country that do not look like that softball tournament in Beaverton are run by the party that hates Christianity. If we want to increase civility, we need to increase Christianity. There is no need for an Ivy League study. The evidence is as plain as a nose on your face. Your eyes ain't lying. Don't shoot the messenger, baby. I'm just reporting what I see. Run that through the prism of rationale. If it makes sense, keep it. If it doesn't make sense, throw it away. Imago Dei, and peace out.